What happens when confidence meets curiosity, when experience challenges youth, and when a simple question changes everything you thought you knew about yourself? If you're drawn to stories where life takes unexpected turns and people surprise you in the most incredible ways, then you're in exactly the right place. This is Real Stories, Real People, where ordinary moments become extraordinary journeys. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow, I've saved something extra special for you. I'm Jake Miller, 28 years old, and up until 3 months ago, I thought I had life figured out. Well, maybe not figured out, but at least organized into neat little boxes. Freelance graphic design work that paid the bills, a part-time gig at Sunrise Coffee House in Millbrook Heights, Colorado, and a comfortable routine that revolved around Adobe Creative Suite, espresso shots, and the occasional weekend hike in the Rockies. My days followed a predictable rhythm that I'd grown to appreciate after the chaos of my recent breakup with Ashley. Ashley Chen had been my girlfriend for 3 years, and when she left 2 months ago, she made sure to catalog every single way I was insufficient. Too predictable, she said. Too comfortable with mediocrity. Too satisfied with small-town life, when there was a whole world of ambition waiting in places like Denver or San Francisco. Her parting words still echoed in my mind during quiet moments. "You're sweet, Jake, but you're just not enough for someone who wants more." The sting of those words had settled into a dull ache that I carried around like a stone in my pocket. My daily routine had become a form of therapy. Wake up at 7, coffee on the front porch of my rented craftsman cottage while watching the neighborhood come alive. The Kowalskis next door would emerge for their morning walk, Frank helping Rose down the front steps with the gentle patience of 45 years of marriage. Across the street, Kevin and Sarah Thompson would be juggling. Twin toddlers and travel mugs, their minivan always somehow managing to leave exactly 3 minutes late. Patricia Davis from the corner house would peer through her curtains, mentally noting everyone's activities for later dissection at the HOA meetings she ruled with an iron fist disguised as community concern. After coffee, I'd retreat to my home office, a converted bedroom where I designed everything from local restaurant logos to wedding invitations for people I'd never meet. The work was steady, if not spectacular, and it gave me the flexibility to pick up afternoon shifts at Sunrise Coffee House when rent was due, or when I simply needed human interaction beyond email exchanges with clients. The coffee shop had become my social lifeline, a place where I could hide behind the familiar ritual of crafting lattes and cappuccinos, while engaging in the kind of surface-level conversations that didn't require vulnerability. Danny Rodriguez, my best friend since high school, worked as a personal trainer at the gym downtown and made it his personal mission to drag me out of what he called my post-breakup hermit phase. Every few days, he'd show up unannounced with energy drinks and unsolicited advice about getting back out there. My sister Emma, home from college for the summer, had taken a different approach, alternating between fierce protectiveness and gentle mockery of my newfound contentment with solitude. The neighborhood itself was the kind of place where everyone knew everyone's business, but in a mostly benevolent way. Millbrook Heights had been developed in the early 2000s as a planned community, complete with walking trails, a small park, and enough architectural variety to avoid the cookie-cutter suburban trap. The Homeowners Association, under Patricia's watchful eye, maintained strict standards about lawn care, holiday decorations, and the appropriate volume for weekend gatherings. It was the sort of place where you could leave your car unlocked and where borrowed lawnmowers were returned with full gas tanks. This was my world, and despite Ashley's criticisms, I'd grown to appreciate its quiet rhythms. There was something comforting about predictability, about knowing that Frank would wave from his garden every morning and that the Kumar family at the corner market would ask about my latest design projects whenever I stopped by for groceries. It wasn't the life Ashley had envisioned for us, but it was mine, and I was learning to be okay with that. 3 weeks ago, that comfortable predictability shifted when a moving truck appeared in front of the house 2 doors down. The previous owners, an elderly couple named the Hendersons, had moved to assisted living after Mr. Henderson's stroke last winter. Their house had sat empty for months, the realtor's sign becoming a permanent fixture in the overgrown front yard. When the moving truck arrived on a Tuesday morning, half the neighborhood found excuses to be outside, curious about who would be joining our little community. The first thing I noticed was the car, a sleek black Audi Q5 that looked like it belonged in a luxury car commercial, rather than parked between Frank's aging Honda and Kevin's family-friendly minivan. The second thing I noticed was her. Monica Sullivan emerged from the driver's seat with the kind of confidence that seemed to bend the space around her. She was tall, probably 5'7", with shoulder-length auburn hair that caught the morning sunlight and moved with the precision of someone who'd never had a bad hair day. Her outfit was simple but polished. Dark jeans that fit perfectly, a cream-colored blouse, and ankle boots that probably cost more than I made in a week. Even from my front porch, 60 feet away, I could sense something different about her. Where most new neighbors spent their first day looking overwhelmed by boxes and logistics, Monica moved with purpose, directing the movers with clear instructions, while simultaneously taking phone calls that sounded like business deals being closed on the spot. She wasn't just moving into the neighborhood, she was claiming it. Patricia Davis appeared within hours of course, armed with a welcome basket and enough questions to fuel a month's worth of HOA meetings. I watched from my office window as Monica handled Patricia's interrogation with polite efficiency, answering questions without revealing much, smiling warmly while maintaining clear boundaries. It was masterful, really. Within 20 minutes, Patricia had been thanked, complimented on her garden, and gently dismissed, leaving with more questions than answers and the slightly dazed expression of someone who'd been outmaneuvered by a professional. Over the following days, more details emerged through the neighborhood grapevine. Monica was recently divorced, a real estate agent transitioning from Denver to establish her own practice in the growing Millbrook area. She had a teenage daughter who would be finishing her senior year at the local high school. She'd paid cash for the house, which impressed even Patricia's husband Bob, who worked in banking and appreciated such financial decisiveness. What the neighborhood grapevine couldn't capture was the way Monica carried herself. There was an ease in her movements, a certainty in her decisions that spoke of hard-won experience. When she worked in her garden during the evenings, she didn't garden like someone learning. She gardened like someone who knew exactly what would thrive and where. When she received delivery trucks, she directed them with the authority of someone who'd managed much larger logistical challenges. Everything about her suggested competence, sophistication, and a life lived fully. I found myself paying attention to her schedule without meaning to. She left every morning around 8:30, always looking professionally polished, returning in the early evening with the slightly tired satisfaction of someone who'd accomplished something significant. Some evenings, a teenage girl would emerge from a friend's car, and I'd catch glimpses of what must be her daughter Chloe, tall like her mother, but with the restless energy of someone counting down the days until graduation and escape to whatever came next. The contrast between Monica's life and my own became more apparent with each passing day. While I worked in sweatpants from my converted bedroom, she was out there building something new, taking risks, making things happen. While I was still processing the end of a 3-year relationship, she was creating an entirely new life after what must have been a much more significant ending. The difference wasn't just about age or experience. It was about approach, about the willingness to leap rather than carefully plan each step. Danny noticed my attention during one of his unannounced visits. "Dude, you're staring," he said, following my gaze toward Monica's house where she was washing her car in the driveway. "And that's not necessarily a bad thing. She's gorgeous." "I'm not staring," I protested, though we both knew I was. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. "I'm just observing new neighbor dynamics and all that." "Right," Danny grinned. "Observing. Is that what we're calling it now?" But it wasn't attraction exactly, or at least, it wasn't just attraction. There was something about Monica that challenged my assumptions about what life could look like, about what confidence meant, about the possibilities that existed beyond the comfortable boundaries I'd drawn around myself. She represented something I couldn't quite name, a way of being in the world that seemed both foreign and appealing. Emma, during one of her summer visits home, was more direct in her assessment. "She's intimidating," she announced after Monica had waved hello during one of our evening porch conversations. But in a good way, like intimidating in the way that makes you want to level up your own game. "What's that supposed to mean?" I asked. "It means maybe Ashley was right about one thing," Emma said, dodging the pillow I threw at her. "Maybe you have been playing it too safe. Not that you need to change for some ex-girlfriend's opinion, but maybe there's something to be said for taking a few more risks. The conversation stuck with me as I went through my evening routine. As I locked up the house and turned off the lights, I could see Monica's kitchen window glowing warmly across the yard. Sometimes she was visible, moving around what looked like a much more organized and adult kitchen than my own collection of mismatched appliances and takeout containers. Other times, just the light suggested life happening, decisions being made, a future being actively constructed rather than simply waited for. 3 weeks into her residency in Millbrook Heights, Monica Sullivan had already begun to shift something in the neighborhood's dynamic. Not dramatically, but subtly, the way a new ingredient can change the entire flavor of a familiar recipe. Frank and Rose had started lingering longer during their evening walks, hoping to catch her outside for conversation. Kevin and Sarah had begun timing their morning departures to coincide with hers, drawn to her easy confidence with their chaotic twin wrangling routine. Even Patricia's surveillance had taken on a quality more curious than suspicious, as if she was trying to decode the secret of Monica's effortless competence. For my part, I found myself wondering what it would be like to live with that kind of intentionality, that sense of forward momentum. My post-Ashley life had been about healing and regrouping, about proving to myself that I could be content with less dramatic ambitions. But watching Monica made me question whether contentment was the same thing as growth, whether there might be more to discover about myself if I was willing to step outside the careful boundaries I'd constructed. I had no idea that within days, Monica would challenge everything I thought I knew about those boundaries, about myself, and about what it meant to really live instead of simply existing. I had no idea that a simple question, asked with the kind of direct confidence that had already transformed our quiet neighborhood, would completely upend the careful equilibrium I'd built around my comfortable, predictable life. The morning that changed everything started like any other, with coffee on my front porch and the familiar rhythm of Millbrook Heights coming alive around me. But as I sat there, watching Monica emerge from her house with her usual purposeful stride, I couldn't have imagined that before the day was over, she would look me directly in the eye and ask a question that would force me to confront every assumption I'd made about experience, attraction, and what it means to really know yourself. The day Monica Sullivan changed my life forever began with what should have been a routine Thursday morning. I was settling into my usual post-coffee design work when I heard the unmistakable sound of car trouble, that grinding, reluctant wheeze of an engine refusing to cooperate. Through my office window, I could see Monica standing beside her Audi in the driveway, phone pressed to her ear, her usual composed demeanor showing the first cracks I'd witnessed since her arrival. Her conversation was animated but controlled, the kind of professional crisis management that suggested this wasn't her first experience with unexpected problems. She was wearing a charcoal gray suit that probably cost more than my monthly rent, clearly dressed for something important, and the frustration radiating from her posture was palpable, even from my distant vantage point. After several minutes of increasingly urgent phone calls, she disappeared back into her house, emerging moments later in jeans and a fitted sweater, her business day apparently derailed by mechanical failure. I watched her pop the hood of her car with the confident movements of someone who at least knew where to look, even if she couldn't fix what she found. She stood there for a moment, hands on her hips, staring at the engine with the expression of someone mentally calculating the cost of this disruption in both time and money. It was the first time I'd seen Monica Sullivan look anything less than completely in control, and somehow that small crack in her armor made her seem more human, more approachable. Before I could talk myself out of it, I found myself walking across the space between our houses. "Car trouble?" I called out, immediately regretting the obviousness of the question. Monica looked up, and for the first time since she'd moved in, I was close enough to really see her face. She had these incredible green eyes that seemed to take in everything at once, and when she smiled, it was the kind of smile that suggested she was genuinely pleased by the interruption, rather than merely being polite. "The understatement of the year," she said, gesturing toward the engine. "I have 3 showings today and a closing this afternoon, and apparently my car has decided today is the perfect day to stage a rebellion. I'm not much of a mechanic," I admitted, "but I know a guy. Danny Rodriguez runs the garage downtown. He's honest, fast, and he won't try to sell you things you don't need." "You'd recommend him?" she asked, and there was something in this way she asked that suggested my opinion actually mattered to her. Absolutely. Want me to give him a call? Monica's relief was immediate and genuine. That would be incredible. Thank you, Jake. The fact that she knew my name shouldn't have surprised me. We lived 2 houses apart in a neighborhood where everyone knew everyone. But hearing her say it with that slight rasp in her voice that suggested too much coffee and too many important conversations did something unexpected to my equilibrium. I called Danny, who promised to be there within the hour with his tow truck, and suddenly Monica and I were standing in her driveway with 40 minutes to fill and the awkward realization that our first real conversation was about to happen. Coffee? She offered. I mean, since you're already being so helpful, it's the least I can do. Her kitchen was everything mine wasn't. Clean lines, quality appliances, the kind of organization that suggested someone who had their life together, in ways I could only aspire to. The coffee was good, really good. The kind that came from beans that probably had their own zip code and marketing story. We sat at her breakfast bar, and for the first few minutes the conversation followed the predictable patterns of new neighbor small talk. She'd moved from Denver after her divorce was finalized, wanted a fresh start in a smaller community where she could build her own real estate practice instead of working for someone else's vision. Chloe, her daughter, had initially been resistant to the move but was adjusting better than expected, especially since it was just a few months until graduation and college freedom. Monica had chosen Millbrook Heights specifically because it felt like the kind of community where people looked out for each other, where business could be built on relationships rather than just transactions. What about you? She asked. Have you always lived here? I found myself telling her about my path to Millbrook Heights, college in Fort Collins, a few years trying to make it as a designer in Denver, the realization that I preferred the pace and community feel of smaller places. I mentioned the coffee shop job, my freelance design work, even touched briefly on Ashley and the recent breakup, though I tried to keep that part light and non-dramatic. Ah, Monica said, and there was something knowing in her voice. The ex, who didn't appreciate what she had. Something like that, I said, surprised by her directness. Well, Monica said, refilling our coffee cups, her loss is our neighborhood's gain. There was something in the way she said our neighborhood that made me feel included in something larger than just geographical proximity. Monica had a way of making conversation feel significant without being heavy, of asking questions that suggested genuine interest rather than polite obligation. When Danny arrived with his tow truck, I almost felt disappointed that our impromptu coffee session was ending. Over the following days, our dynamic shifted from distant neighbors to something approaching actual acquaintance. Monica would wave when she saw me on my porch, sometimes stopping for brief conversations that gradually grew longer and more substantive. She had opinions about everything. The best local restaurants, the most efficient routes to avoid downtown traffic, the politics of homeowners associations, and she expressed them with the confidence of someone who'd learned to trust her own judgment. One evening, about a week after the car incident, I was watering the small garden plot behind my house when Monica appeared at the fence line separating our properties. She was holding a bottle of wine and wearing a sundress that managed to be both casual and elegant, the kind of effortless style that probably required more thought than it appeared. I owe you a thank you, she said. Your friend Danny not only fixed my car but found 3 other problems that could have left me stranded at much worse times. He saved me a fortune in potential roadside disasters. Danny's good people, I said, turning off the hose and walking toward the fence. I was thinking, Monica continued, that maybe I could cook you dinner as a proper thank you. I mean, if you're not too busy with your exciting evening of watering plants. The invitation caught me off guard, not because it was inappropriate, but because it felt significant in a way I couldn't quite define. That's really not necessary, I said, then immediately worried that I sounded like I was declining. Necessary? No, Monica agreed. But I make an excellent chicken piccata, and I bought way too much wine for one person to drink responsibly. Consider it a neighborly gesture with the added benefit of keeping me from becoming the cautionary tale about the divorced woman who drinks alone in her kitchen. The self-deprecating humor was new, a crack in the polished confidence I'd come to associate with her. And it made the invitation feel more genuine, less like obligation, and more like actual desire for company. When you put it like that, I said, how can I refuse? Saturday night, 7 o'clock? I'll be there. Saturday evening, I found myself standing on Monica's front porch with a bottle of wine that Danny had helped me select, and a level of nervousness that seemed disproportionate to a simple thank you dinner between neighbors. I'd changed clothes 3 times, settling finally on dark jeans and a button-down shirt that Emma had assured me made me look like an adult rather than a perpetual college student. Monica answered the door in black pants and a silk blouse that somehow managed to look both sophisticated and approachable. Her hair was pulled back loosely, and she was wearing the kind of minimal makeup that suggested natural beauty enhanced rather than concealed. "Perfect timing," she said, accepting the wine with a smile that seemed genuinely pleased rather than merely polite. Her dining room was set for 2 with actual cloth napkins and matching plates, the kind of table setting that suggested someone who understood that presentation mattered. Candles flickered on the sideboard, and jazz played softly from hidden speakers, creating an atmosphere that felt more like a date than a neighborly thank you dinner. The realization should have made me nervous, but instead, it felt oddly natural, as if this was simply what dinner was supposed to look like when adults took the time to do it properly. The chicken piccata was, as promised, excellent, and the conversation flowed with an ease that surprised us both. Monica told me about her years in corporate marketing before transitioning to real estate, about the challenge of rebuilding her professional identity after a divorce that had left her questioning everything she thought she knew about herself. She talked about Chloe with the mixture of pride and bewilderment that seemed universal among parents of teenagers, about the delicate balance between giving her daughter space to make her own choices and providing enough guidance to prevent disaster. "What about you?" she asked over dessert, a tiramisu that she'd apparently made from scratch because casual excellence seemed to be her default setting. "What are your dreams beyond graphic design and coffee shop shifts?" It was the kind of question Ashley had asked with frustration, as if my answer would inevitably disappoint her. But when Monica asked, it felt like genuine curiosity rather than judgment. I found myself telling her about ideas I rarely shared. The possibility of opening my own design studio, maybe expanding into brand consulting for small businesses, the half-formed notion of writing a book about finding contentment in smaller ambitions. "Those don't sound like smaller ambitions," Monica said. "They sound like thoughtful ones. There's a difference between settling and choosing intentionally." The distinction hit me with unexpected force. Ashley had seen my choices as settling, as a failure to reach for something bigger and more impressive. But Monica framed them as intentional, as decisions made with purpose rather than fear. It was a subtle shift in perspective, but it changed everything about how I saw my own life. As the evening progressed, the conversation became more personal, more honest. Monica talked about the loneliness of starting over at 49, about the challenge of rediscovering who she was outside of the identity she'd built around marriage and family. She spoke about the fear that her best years were behind her, that she'd missed some crucial window for adventure and self-discovery. "The thing about divorce," she said, refilling our wine glasses, "is that it forces you to confront all the ways you've been living for other people's expectations. Suddenly you're free to make your own choices, but you realize you've forgotten how to know what you actually want." "And what do you want?" I asked. Monica was quiet for a moment, swirling, the wine in her glass. "I want to feel alive again," she said finally. "I want to take risks and make mistakes and have experiences that surprise me. I want to remember what it feels like to be desired for who I am, not just for the role I play in someone else's life." The honesty in her voice was startling, and suddenly the careful distance we'd maintained throughout the evening felt artificial. We were sitting across from each other at our dining room table, 2 people who'd been politely circling around an attraction that was becoming impossible to ignore. "Jake," Monica said, and the way she said my name made everything else fall away. "Can I ask you something?" "Of course." She leaned forward slightly, her green eyes holding mine with an intensity that made my pulse quicken. "I'm 49 years old. I've been married, divorced, and I've learned things about myself and about life that I never could have imagined when I was your age. I have experience that your ex-girlfriend, sweet as she probably was, simply hasn't had time to acquire." I felt my breath catch, understanding exactly where this was heading, but unable to look away from her face. from the confidence radiating from her every word. "So I have to ask," Monica continued, her voice dropping to barely above a whisper. "I'm 49, more experienced than your ex. Want to find out how?" The question hung in the air between us like a challenge, like an invitation, like the moment when everything familiar shifts into something completely unknown. I looked at Monica, really looked at her, and saw not just my sophisticated neighbor, but a woman who knew exactly what she wanted and wasn't afraid to ask for it. The directness was breathtaking, terrifying, and absolutely irresistible. My entire carefully constructed post-Ashley life, with its comfortable routines and modest ambitions, suddenly felt like a rehearsal for this moment. Monica wasn't asking me to be someone different. She was asking me to be more myself than I'd ever dared to be. The question wasn't just about attraction or experience. It was about courage, about the willingness to step into the unknown and see what might be possible. "Yes," I heard myself say, the word escaping before I could analyze or second-guess or find all the reasons why this was complicated. "Yes, I want to find out." Monica's smile in response was unlike anything I'd seen from her before. Not the polished, professional smile she wore for the neighborhood, but something raw and genuine and full of promise. She stood up from her chair, extending her hand toward me, and I realized that everything I thought I knew about my life, about myself, about what it meant to really live, was about to change forever. The candles flickered in the dining room as I took her hand, and somewhere in the back of my mind, I understood that this moment would divide my life into before and after, into the careful existence I'd built for myself, and whatever came next. Monica Sullivan, my 49-year-old neighbor with her unexpected questions and dangerous confidence, was about to teach me things I'd never even known I needed to learn. What happened next wasn't what either of us expected. The moment Monica's question left her lips, hanging in the candlelit air between us, I felt something fundamental shift inside me. Not just attraction, though that was certainly there, but something deeper. A recognition that this woman was offering me more than just physical intimacy. She was offering me a chance to discover parts of myself I'd never explored, to step into a version of my life that required courage I wasn't sure I possessed. The wine had left us both relaxed but not reckless, aware of the significance of what was happening without the fog of poor judgment. When I said yes, when I took her extended hand, Monica's fingers were warm and steady, and she led me not upstairs as I might have expected, but out onto her back deck where the Colorado evening air carried the scent of her garden and the distant sound of the Thompsons twins being coaxed toward bedtime. "I want to tell you something first," Monica said, settling onto the outdoor sofa and pulling me down beside her. The cushions were expensive, the kind that maintained their shape and comfort, and we sat close enough that I could smell her perfume. Something subtle and sophisticated that probably had a French name I couldn't pronounce. "I don't do this," she continued. "I don't invite younger men over for dinner and proposition them over tiramisu. That's not who I've been, maybe not even who I am. But sitting here with you tonight, I realized something important." She turned to face me fully, one leg tucked under her, and in the soft lighting from her kitchen windows, she looked simultaneously vulnerable and confident, uncertain and absolutely sure of herself. For 23 years, I was the wife Marcus needed me to be. Professional when he needed a networking partner, maternal when he needed support with Chloe, accommodating when his career demanded flexibility from our family. I was good at being what other people needed, so good that I forgot to ask myself what I needed. Her honesty was disarming, and I found myself leaning closer, drawn not just by attraction, but by the rare experience of someone being completely authentic about their motivations. "The divorce wasn't dramatic," Monica continued. "No affairs, no explosive fights. Just the slow realization that we'd grown into two people who shared a house and a daughter, but had stopped seeing each other as individuals worth discovering. When it ended, I thought the hardest part would be practical. Dividing assets, co-parenting arrangements, building a new career. But the real challenge has been remembering how to want things for myself, how to make choices based on what excites me rather than what's expected." "And this excites you?" I asked, gesturing between us. Monica's smile was slow and genuine. "Terrifies me," she admitted. "Which is exactly why I know it's right." When was the last time you did something that scared you, Jake? The question hit me harder than I expected. When was the last time I'd chosen courage over comfort? When Ashley left, I'd responded by making my life smaller, safer, more predictable. I'd told myself it was healing, but maybe it was just hiding. I can't remember, I said honestly. Then we're both overdue. What followed wasn't the passionate, impulsive encounter that movies might have scripted. Instead, Monica introduced me to the concept of intentional intimacy, of taking time to really see and be seen by another person. She kissed me slowly, deliberately, as if she had all the time in the world and intended to use every moment. Her hands were confident, exploring with the assurance of someone who knew exactly what she wanted and wasn't afraid to take it. But she also taught me about patience, about building anticipation, about the difference between rushing toward a destination and savoring the journey. We spent hours on that deck, talking and touching, discovering each other's stories and bodies with equal curiosity. Monica shared details about her marriage that helped me understand not just what had ended it, but what she'd learned about herself in the process. Marcus was a good man, she said at one point, her head resting on my shoulder as we watched the neighborhood settle into sleep around us. But he saw me as a beautiful accessory to his life, rather than a complete person with my own desires and ambitions. I don't think he meant to diminish me, but 23 years of being seen as supportive rather than substantial takes a toll. How do you want to be seen? I asked. As someone worth discovering, she said immediately. As someone with depths and complexities and contradictions. I want to be seen as desirable not just for how I look or what I can provide, but for who I am when no one else is watching. The vulnerability in her voice made me understand that this evening wasn't really about sex, though that was certainly part of it. It was about reclaiming herself, about being desired for her own sake rather than for the role she played in someone else's narrative. I was young enough to be flattered by her attention, but old enough to recognize the gift she was offering. Not just her body, but her trust, her authenticity, her willingness to be vulnerable with someone who could easily misunderstand or misuse what she was sharing. When we finally moved inside, to her bedroom with its carefully chosen furniture and art that reflected her personal taste rather than some magazine's idea of what a bedroom should look like, Monica continued my education in ways I'd never imagined. She showed me how touch could be both gentle and demanding, how desire could be expressed through patience as much as passion. She taught me that experience wasn't just about technique, though she certainly had that, but about confidence, communication, and the courage to ask for what you wanted. Tell me what you're thinking, she whispered at one point, and when I hesitated, she added, I want to know you, Jake. All of you. The parts you show the world and the parts you keep hidden. So I told her about Ashley's criticisms, about feeling like I was somehow insufficient, like my contentment with smaller ambitions made me less worthy of love. I told her about the fear that maybe I was settling, that maybe comfort was just another word for cowardice. Monica listened with her whole body, responding not just with words, but with touches that made me feel heard, understood, desired, exactly, as I was. Ashley was young, Monica said finally. Young people often mistake ambition for worth, drama for depth, but I'm telling you, as someone with enough experience to recognize authenticity when I see it, you're not settling, Jake. You're choosing intentionally. There's a maturity in that, a wisdom that someone Ashley's age simply hasn't had time to develop. Her words didn't just comfort me. They reframed everything I'd been telling myself about my life, my choices, my worth. Monica saw my contentment, not as limitation but as self-awareness. My preference for community over conquest, not as small thinking but as clarity about what actually mattered. We fell asleep wrapped around each other, and I woke the next morning to the smell of real coffee and the sound of Monica moving around her kitchen with the efficiency of someone who'd been managing mornings successfully for decades. She was wearing a silk robe that probably cost more than my monthly grocery budget, but when she smiled at me over her coffee cup, there was nothing performative about it, just genuine pleasure at my presence in her space. "Good morning," she said, and there was something different in her voice, lighter, more relaxed, as if our night together had settled something inside her that had been restless for longer than she'd realized. "Morning," I said, suddenly aware that I was wearing yesterday's clothes and probably looked like exactly what I was. A younger man who'd spent the night with his sophisticated neighbor. "Coffee?" Monica offered, already reaching for another cup. "I was thinking we could sit on the deck for a while before the neighborhood starts its morning routine." I'm not quite ready to share you with Frank and Rose's curious glances. The possessiveness in her voice was mild but unmistakable, and it sent a thrill through me that had nothing to do with sex, and everything to do with being claimed, being wanted, being seen as worth keeping close. We spent the morning talking about everything and nothing, her plans for expanding her real estate business, my ideas for new design projects, the strange intimacy of discovering someone's morning routines and preferences. Monica moved through her space with the confidence of someone completely comfortable in her own skin, and being included in that private world felt like a privilege I was still learning to appreciate. Around 10 o'clock, the spell was broken by the sound of a car door slamming in Monica's driveway. Through the kitchen window, we could see a teenage girl with Monica's height and the expression of barely contained irritation stalking toward the front door. "Chloe," Monica said, and there was a note of panic in her voice that I'd never heard before. She wasn't supposed to be back until tonight. The front door opened before either of us could move, and suddenly I was face to face with Monica's 17-year-old daughter, who took in the scene. Her mother in a silk robe, me in yesterday's clothes, the obvious intimacy of our morning coffee routine, with the sharp perception that teenagers brought to adult hypocrisy. "Well," Chloe said, dropping her overnight bag with pointed emphasis, "this is interesting." Monica recovered her composure with impressive speed, moving into parental mode without losing her dignity. "Chloe, I'd like you to meet Jake Miller. He's our neighbor from down the street. Jake, this is my daughter Chloe." "The neighbor," Chloe repeated, her tone suggesting she understood exactly what kind of neighboring had been happening. "Right. Hi, Jake." "Hi," I managed, feeling suddenly like an intruder in a family dynamic I didn't understand. "Honey," Monica said carefully, "I thought you were staying at Sarah's until tonight." "Sarah's parents decided on a spontaneous family breakfast," Chloe said, her eyes moving between her mother and me with the calculating attention of someone gathering information for future use. "So here I am. Hope I'm not interrupting anything important." The sarcasm was gentle but unmistakable, and I could see Monica weighing her options. How much to explain, how much to deflect, how to navigate this collision between her new life and her role as a mother. "Actually," I said, standing up and reaching for my shoes, "I should probably head home. I've got some design work to catch up on." It was a graceful exit line, giving both Monica and Chloe space to navigate this conversation without an audience. But Chloe's next words stopped me at the door. "You don't have to leave because of me," she said, and there was something almost kind in her voice. "I mean, Mom's an adult. She's allowed to have neighbors over for coffee." The emphasis on coffee was pointed but not cruel, and I realized that Chloe was offering her own version of acceptance, or at least tolerance. Monica's relief was visible, and when she walked me to the door, her kiss goodbye was brief but unmistakably proprietary, a statement for her daughter's benefit as much as mine. "I'll call you later," she said, and there was a promise in those words that extended far beyond a simple phone call. Walking back to my house, I was acutely aware of the neighborhood around me in ways I'd never been before. Frank was watering his garden and offered his usual morning wave, but I wondered if he could somehow tell that I was different, that something fundamental had shifted in my understanding of myself and what was possible. Patricia was checking her mailbox with her typical surveillance attention, and I found myself straightening my shoulders, walking with more confidence than I'd felt in months. Danny called around noon, ostensibly to check on Monica's car, but really to fish for information about why I sounded different on the phone. "You sound weird," he said without preamble. "Good weird, but weird. What's going on?" "Nothing's going on," I said, which was technically true and completely misleading at the same time. "Right," Danny said, "and I'm the Queen of England. Spill it, Miller." But I wasn't ready to share what had happened, wasn't ready to subject the experience to Danny's well-meaning but ultimately superficial analysis. What Monica and I had shared felt too significant, too complex to be reduced to locker room conversation, even with my best friend. "I'll tell you later," I said finally, "when I figure out what there is to tell." "Mysterious," Danny said. "I like it. Just remember, Mystery's only attractive if it doesn't turn into secrecy. People need to know where they stand with you. His words stayed with me as I tried to focus on work, on the logo redesign for a local veterinary clinic that suddenly seemed trivial compared to the personal redesign happening in my own life. Monica had awakened something in me that I hadn't even realized was sleeping. A sense of possibility, of worthiness, of potential that extended far beyond the comfortable boundaries I'd drawn around myself. But Danny's warning about secrecy versus mystery resonated too. Whatever was happening between Monica and me, it couldn't exist in isolation from the rest of our lives, from our community, from the practical realities of age differences and social expectations. The neighborhood that had seemed so accepting and benevolent suddenly felt full of potential judgment, of questions I wasn't sure I was ready to answer. Emma called that evening, her college student's radar apparently finely tuned to detect changes in her older brother's life. "You sound different," she said, echoing Danny's observation. "Happier, less mopey. Did something happen?" "Why does everyone think something happened?" I asked. "Because we know you," Emma said, "and you've been in post-Ashley hibernation mode for 2 months. Suddenly you sound like someone who remembered he has a pulse. So yeah, something happened." The accuracy of her assessment was uncomfortable. Had I really been that transparent in my retreat from life? That obvious in my diminished expectations for happiness? "Maybe I'm just feeling better," I said. "Or maybe someone helped you feel better," Emma said with the knowing tone of someone who'd inherited our mother's intuition for emotional subterfuge. "I'm just saying, if someone did help, I hope you're smart enough not to overthink it into non-existence." Her words echoed in my mind as I prepared for bed, as I replayed the previous 24 hours and tried to understand what it meant for my future. Monica had offered me more than just physical intimacy. She'd offered me a new way of seeing myself, a confidence I'd never possessed, a sense of worthiness that wasn't dependent on external validation. But she'd also introduced complications I wasn't sure I was equipped to handle. The age difference that had seemed irrelevant in the intimacy of her bedroom felt more significant in the harsh light of community scrutiny. The sophistication that had been so attractive in private might become a source of insecurity in public. The experience that had been such a gift might also be a reminder of everything I still had to learn. As I fell asleep in my own bed, I wondered what tomorrow would bring. Whether the magic of our night together could survive the practical realities of daylight and teenage daughters and neighborhood gossip. I wondered if Monica was lying in her own bed having similar thoughts, or if her greater experience had taught her how to navigate these waters with more confidence than I could muster. What I didn't know, couldn't have anticipated, was that our night together had set in motion a series of events that would challenge everything I thought I understood about relationships, community, and the courage required to live authentically. The sophisticated, confident woman who'd invited me into her bed was about to discover that taking risks often meant confronting consequences neither of us had fully considered. The week following Chloe's unexpected return home passed in a strange suspension between normalcy and transformation. Monica and I maintained the careful dance of neighbors who shared more than geographical proximity, exchanging meaningful glances across our respective yards while performing the mundane tasks that kept our separate lives functioning. She would wave from her car as she left for property showings, and I would raise my coffee cup in response from my front porch. Both of us aware that these small gestures carried weight far beyond their simple appearance. Chloe's presence had added a layer of complexity that neither Monica nor I had fully anticipated. The teenager moved through their house with the sharp awareness of someone gathering intelligence. Not maliciously, but with the natural curiosity of a young person trying to understand how her mother's new life might affect her own carefully constructed senior year plans. During the few conversations I'd witnessed between them, Chloe displayed a maturity that suggested she understood more about adult relationships than most people her age, but also a protective instinct toward Monica that made me acutely aware of my position as a potential disruptor in their family dynamic. My own routine had shifted subtly but significantly. The design work that had previously consumed my mornings now felt like a pleasant distraction rather than a central focus, something to occupy my hands while my mind processed the implications of what Monica had awakened in me. The afternoon shifts at Sunrise Coffee House became opportunities to observe human interaction with new eyes. to watch couples of various ages navigate their relationships and wonder what people saw when they looked at us, what assumptions they made about compatibility and appropriateness. Emma had driven up from Fort Collins unexpectedly on Thursday afternoon, arriving with the announced intention of checking on my well-being, but clearly motivated by curiosity about the changes she'd detected in our phone conversations. She walked into my house with the confident stride of someone who'd grown up with keys to every lock, took one look around, and immediately zeroed in on details I hadn't realized were visible. "You cleaned," she announced, surveying my living room with the attention of a detective. "Actually cleaned, not just shoved things into closets. And you're wearing a shirt that actually fits properly. Something definitely happened." Her powers of observation had always been unnervingly accurate, a family trait that had made lying to our parents virtually impossible during our teenage years. Now, at 25, Emma had refined these skills into an ability to read emotional states with scientific precision. "I can clean without it being a major life event," I protested, though we both knew this was technically true and practically false. "Sure," Emma said, settling into my previously neglected armchair with the air of someone planning an extended interrogation. "And I can show up unannounced without ulterior motives. We're both very believable people." She stayed for dinner, cooking pasta with ingredients she'd brought from the city because she claimed my refrigerator looked like a monument to bachelor resignation. While we ate, she deployed her considerable talents for extracting information through seemingly casual conversation, asking about the neighborhood, my work, my social life, circling gradually closer to whatever instinct had driven her 3 hours north to check on me. "So," she said finally, twirling linguine with the deliberate precision of someone approaching a significant topic, "Danny mentioned you've been acting mysterious lately. Secret girlfriend? Midlife crisis at 28? Sudden religious conversion?" "Danny talks too much," I said, which was both true and completely beside the point. "Danny worries about you," Emma corrected. "We all do. Ever since Ashley, you've been in this weird holding pattern, like you're waiting for permission to start living again. So if something's shaken you out of that, even if it's complicated, I'm probably going to be grateful." Her honesty disarmed me, as it always did. Emma had a way of cutting through pretense to reach the emotional core of situations, a skill that made her an excellent psychology major and an occasionally uncomfortable sister. "It's not a secret girlfriend," I said carefully. "It's more like an unexpected friendship." "Friendship," Emma repeated, her tone suggesting she found this classification interesting but incomplete. "The kind of friendship that requires shirt upgrades and deep cleaning?" Before I could formulate a response that was both honest and appropriately vague, the doorbell rang. Through the window, I could see Monica standing on my front porch, wearing jeans and a sweater that somehow managed to look effortlessly elegant, holding what appeared to be a bottle of wine, and wearing an expression that suggested she'd been debating this visit for some time. "Expecting someone?" Emma asked with the innocence of someone who already knew the answer. I opened the door to find Monica looking slightly uncertain for the first time since I'd known her, as if she wasn't quite sure of her welcome. "Hi," she said. "I was wondering if you'd like to share this wine. Chloe's at a friend's house working on a group project, and I thought maybe we could continue that conversation we started the other day." Her carefully neutral phrasing suggested she was aware we might not be alone, and when she spotted Emma over my shoulder, her expression shifted to something more guarded, but still warm. "Monica, this is my sister Emma," I said, stepping aside to let her in. "Emma, this is Monica Sullivan, my neighbor." "The neighbor," Emma said, and there was something in her tone that suggested she understood exactly which neighbor this was and why her brother had been acting different lately. Monica moved into my living room with the confident grace that characterized everything she did, but I could sense her awareness of being evaluated, of walking into a family dynamic where alliances and loyalties had been established long before her arrival. Emma, to her credit, shifted immediately into her most charming mode, the version of herself she deployed when meeting professors or potential employers. "I was just giving Jake grief about his mysterious behavior lately," Emma said, accepting the wine Monica offered with a smile. "He's been suspiciously happy, and we've been trying to figure out why." "Suspiciously happy," Monica repeated, glancing at me with amusement. "That does sound concerning." What followed was one of the most surreal evenings of my life. watching my sister and my sophisticated neighbor navigate their first meeting while I tried to figure out how to manage the competing loyalties and expectations their presence represented. Emma was curious but respectful, asking about Monica's work and transition to Millbrook Heights without pushing into territory that was clearly personal. Monica was charming but careful, sharing enough to be personable without revealing anything that might complicate family dynamics she didn't yet understand. The conversation ranged from real estate markets to college experiences to the peculiar social dynamics of small communities. And gradually, I began to see them not as potential competitors for my attention, but as two intelligent women discovering they genuinely liked each other. Emma's protective instincts seemed to ease as she observed Monica's obvious intelligence and emotional maturity, while Monica appeared to relax as she realized that Emma's questions came from love rather than suspicion. "So you're recently divorced," Emma said during a lull in conversation, her directness characteristic but not unkind. "Very recently," Monica confirmed, still figuring out what independence looks like after 23 years of making decisions as part of a unit. "That must be both terrifying and exciting," Emma said, and her genuine empathy seemed to surprise Monica. "Exactly that," Monica agreed. "Some days I wake up thrilled by the possibilities, and other days I'm paralyzed by having to choose what to have for breakfast without consulting anyone else." Their connection was immediate and authentic, and watching them discover common ground made me realize how much I'd been worried about the various parts of my life fitting together. Monica wasn't just someone I was attracted to. She was someone who could integrate into my world, who could appreciate the people I loved and be appreciated by them in return. Around 10 o'clock, Emma announced her intention to drive back to Fort Collins, claiming she had an early class, but clearly recognizing that her continued presence might be inhibiting more intimate conversation. She hugged Monica goodbye with genuine warmth and whispered something in her ear that made Monica laugh and nod in what appeared to be agreement. "I like her," Monica said after Emma's taillights disappeared down the street. "She likes you too," I said, which is not a given. Emma has very high standards for people who get close to our family. And I passed the test? With flying colors. Monica settled back onto my couch with her wine, tucking her legs under her in a gesture that suggested she intended to stay for a while. The house felt different with her in it. More complete somehow. As if her presence had activated possibilities I hadn't known existed in my familiar spaces. "Can I tell you something?" she said, her voice taking on the serious tone that indicated a shift toward deeper conversation. "Always." "This week has been strange for me," Monica began. "Not bad strange, but unsettling. I keep catching myself thinking about you at random moments during the day. When I'm showing houses to clients, when I'm making dinner, when I'm lying in bed at night. It's been a long time since someone occupied that much mental real estate." Her admission sent a warmth through me that had nothing to do with the wine. "You've been on my mind too," I said. "Pretty much constantly, if I'm being honest." "The thing is," Monica continued, "I'm not sure what to do with these feelings. I'm 49 years old, Jake. I've been married and divorced. I have a teenage daughter who's about to leave for college. I'm building a new career in a new town. My life is complicated in ways that maybe aren't fair to impose on someone who's just figuring out his own path." The vulnerability in her voice was striking, and I realized that beneath her confident exterior, Monica was just as uncertain about our connection as I was, just as worried about the practical implications of what we'd started. "What if my path includes figuring things out with you?" I asked. Monica's smile was soft but troubled. "What if it doesn't? What if this is just an interlude? A pleasant distraction while we're both between other phases of our lives?" The question hung between us like a challenge, forcing me to confront fears I'd been avoiding. Was I using Monica as a rebound from Ashley, a way to prove to myself that I was desirable and interesting? Was she using me as a bridge between her married life and whatever came next, a safe way to rediscover her sexuality without the complications of a relationship with someone in her own peer group? "I don't know," I said honestly. "I don't know what this is or where it's going. But I know that whatever's happening between us feels more real than anything I've experienced in years. It feels like the opposite of settling, like the opposite of playing it safe." Monica set down her wine glass and moved closer to me on the couch, close enough that I could smell her perfume and see the flecks of gold in her green eyes. "I'm scared," she admitted. Scared of wanting something I can't have? Scared of disrupting the life I'm trying to build for myself and Chloe? Scared of being the older woman who has an affair with her young neighbor and becomes a cautionary tale? And I'm scared of not being enough, I said. Scared that my lack of experience, my smaller ambitions, my ordinary life will eventually disappoint you the way they disappointed Ashley. Oh, Jake, Monica said, her hand finding mine. You're not ordinary. You're authentic, which is so much rarer and more valuable than you realize. We sat in silence for a while, processing the weight of what we'd shared, the fears we'd voiced, the uncertain future we were contemplating together. Outside, Millbrook Heights settled into its evening quiet, and I found myself wondering what our neighbors would think if they knew about the conversation happening in my living room, about the emotional complexity hidden behind our careful suburban facades. What do we do now? I asked finally. I think, Monica said slowly, we take this one day at a time. We be honest with each other about what we're feeling and what we need. We accept that this might not last forever, but we don't let fear of the future prevent us from exploring what's possible now. Her pragmatism was both reassuring and slightly heartbreaking, a reminder that she'd learned hard lessons about the difference between love and compatibility, between desire and sustainability. But there was also hope in her words, a willingness to take risks despite the uncertainty, to choose possibility over safety. The next few weeks passed in a delicate balance between public discretion and private intimacy. Monica and I developed routines that allowed us to spend time together without attracting unwanted attention from the neighborhood surveillance network. Evening walks that appeared casual but allowed for conversation. Coffee on my back deck where we were hidden from most windows but could still maintain the fiction of neighborly friendship. Dinners at her house when Chloe was occupied with senior year activities. Chloe herself proved to be less of an obstacle than either of us had anticipated. After her initial wariness, she seemed to accept my presence in their lives with the adaptability of someone who'd learned to roll with her parents' decisions. She was polite but not overly friendly, protective of her mother but not hostile toward me, clearly reserving judgment until she could determine whether I was a positive or negative influence on their family dynamic. The real challenges came from unexpected directions. Patricia Davis, the self-appointed neighborhood watch captain, had apparently noticed the frequency of my visits to Monica's house and felt compelled to share her observations with anyone willing to listen. Her comments weren't malicious exactly, but they carried the weight of someone who saw it as her responsibility to monitor and evaluate the behavior of her neighbors. That young man certainly spends a lot of time at Monica's house, she mentioned, to Frank Kowalski during one of their garden conversations. Loud enough for me to hear from my own yard. Maybe he's helping her with something, Frank replied mildly, his tone suggesting he had no interest in speculating about other people's personal lives. I'm sure he's helping her with something, Patricia said, with the kind of emphasis that left no doubt about her implications. The gossip might have remained harmless neighborhood entertainment, if not for the arrival of Marcus Sullivan, Monica's ex-husband, who appeared on a Saturday afternoon with the announced intention of discussing Chloe's college financial arrangements. Marcus was everything I'd expected and feared. Tall, successful, impeccably dressed, and clearly accustomed to being the most important person in any room he entered. I was working in my front yard when his BMW pulled into Monica's driveway, and I watched him emerge from the car with the confident stride of someone reclaiming familiar territory. He was handsome in the way that came from good genes and expensive grooming, wearing casual clothes that probably cost more than I made in a month, and carrying himself with the assurance of someone who'd never doubted his place in the world. Through my kitchen window, I could see Monica answering her door, her body language immediately shifting to something more formal, more guarded. Their conversation was too distant for me to hear, but the tension was visible even from across the yard. Marcus gestured frequently as he spoke, his movements suggesting someone making important points, while Monica's responses appeared increasingly terse. After about an hour, Marcus emerged from the house alone, but instead of getting in his car, he walked directly toward my property. I met him at the edge of my driveway, my pulse quickening as I realized this encounter had been inevitable from the moment Monica and I had begun whatever we were beginning. "You must be Jake," Marcus said, extending his hand with the practiced charm of someone skilled in making first impressions. "Marcus Sullivan, Monica's ex-husband." "Jake Miller," I replied, accepting his handshake and trying to match his confident tone. "I wanted to introduce myself," Marcus continued, "since it seems like you've become an important part of my family's life here." The possessiveness in his phrasing was subtle but unmistakable, and I realized that this conversation was less about introduction than evaluation, less about courtesy than territory. "Monica and Chloe have been great neighbors," I said carefully. "I'm sure they have," Marcus agreed. "Monica's always been excellent at making friends. It's one of her many talents." His tone suggested that friend-making was perhaps not Monica's most significant talent, and I felt my defensive instincts activate despite my efforts to remain diplomatic. "Look," Marcus said, his expression becoming more serious. "I don't know what's going on between you and Monica, and frankly, it's none of my business. But Chloe is my daughter, and her well-being is very much my business. I hope you understand that." "Of course," I said. "Chloe seems like a great kid." "She is," Marcus agreed. "And she's at a crucial point in her life. Senior year, college, applications, big decisions about her future. The last thing she needs is instability in her home environment." The implication was clear. I represented potential instability, a complication in a family dynamic that Marcus preferred to control, even from a distance. I wanted to argue, to defend my intentions and Monica's right to make her own choices, but I also understood that he was speaking from genuine concern for his daughter, even if that concern was tangled up with ego and possessiveness. "I would never do anything to hurt Chloe," I said finally. "I believe you mean that," Marcus replied. "But intentions and outcomes don't always align, especially in complicated situations." He left me standing in my driveway with the weight of his warning, and I watched him drive away wondering how much his visit had been about protecting his daughter, and how much had been about reasserting his influence over Monica's life. Either way, his message was clear. I was being watched, evaluated, and judged by standards I wasn't sure I could meet. That evening, Monica appeared at my door with a bottle of wine and an expression that suggested she needed to decompress from her ex-husband's visit. "He wanted to meet you," she said without preamble, settling into my living room chair with the exhausted air of someone who'd been managing a difficult conversation for hours. So I gathered. He seemed concerned. "Marcus is always concerned when he can't control a situation," Monica said, taking a generous sip of wine. 23 years of marriage taught me to recognize the difference between legitimate worry and territorial behavior. And this was territorial? "Mostly," Monica admitted, though he's not wrong about Chloe being at a sensitive point. Senior year is stressful enough without adding relationship drama to the mix. The phrase relationship drama hit me like a small blow, reducing what felt significant and meaningful to the level of soap opera complication. "Is that what this is?" I asked. "Drama?" Monica's expression softened immediately. "No," she said firmly, "but it's how Marcus sees it, and unfortunately, his opinion carries weight because of Chloe. I can't completely ignore his concerns, even when I disagree with his motivations." The complexity of divorced family dynamics was foreign territory for me, and I was beginning to understand how naive I'd been to think that Monica's past could be neatly compartmentalized away from our present. Marcus would always be part of her life because of Chloe, which meant he would always have some influence over decisions that affected me, opinions that mattered in ways I was still learning to navigate. "What did you tell him about us?" I asked. "The truth," Monica said, "that you're a good man who's become important to me, and that my personal life is no longer his business to manage." "How did he take that?" "About as well as you'd expect," Monica said with a rueful smile. "Marcus has never been comfortable with uncertainty, and you represent a variable he can't predict or control." We spent the rest of the evening talking through the implications of Marcus's involvement, the practical realities of building a relationship under external scrutiny, the ways that past decisions continue to shape present possibilities. Monica was honest about the constraints that Chloe's needs placed on her choices, about the delicate balance she had to maintain between her own happiness and her responsibilities as a mother. "I won't let him dictate my life," she said firmly. "But I also can't ignore the fact that my choices affect more people than just myself." Her maturity in handling these competing pressures was both admirable and intimidating. Another reminder of the experience gap between us. I was learning to navigate my first serious adult relationship while she was managing the complex aftermath of a marriage that had lasted longer than I'd been an adult. But instead of making me feel inadequate, her honesty helped me understand what real partnership looked like. Not the dramatic passion of movies or the simple compatibility of shared interests, but the willingness to work through complications together, to balance individual desires with collective responsibilities, to choose each other again and again despite the challenges that arose. Over the following months, Monica and I settled into a rhythm that honored both our connection and the practical constraints of our situation. We were discreet, but not secretive, careful, but not fearful, building something sustainable rather than simply indulging in something exciting. Chloe gradually warmed to my presence, even seeking my advice occasionally about college applications and future plans, treating me not as a replacement father figure, but as a trusted adult friend. Marcus's visits became less frequent and less territorial, as he observed that my relationship with Monica was stabilizing rather than disrupting Chloe's life. Patricia Davis's gossip evolved from speculation to acceptance, and the neighborhood settled into treating us as an established couple rather than a scandalous development. The real transformation was internal, in the way Monica and I had changed each other's understanding of what was possible. She had taught me that confidence wasn't about having all the answers, but about being willing to act despite uncertainty. I had reminded her that authenticity was more valuable than sophistication, that being genuinely seen and appreciated was worth more than being envied or admired from a distance. One evening in late autumn, as we sat on Monica's deck watching the leaves change colors and discussing Chloe's college acceptance letters, Monica turned to me with the kind of serious expression that indicated a significant conversation was coming. "I need to tell you something," she said, her voice carrying a weight that made me immediately attentive. "What is it?" "I love you," she said simply. Not the way I loved Marcus when I was young and thought love meant finding someone to complete me. I love you the way I love you now, at 49, knowing that love means choosing someone who enhances who you already are. The declaration was characteristically direct, mature, and absolutely perfect in its lack of drama or uncertainty. Monica wasn't asking me to rescue her or complete her. She was telling me that she'd chosen me as a partner in the life she was actively building for herself. "I love you too," I said, the words feeling both momentous and completely natural. "I love who I am when I'm with you, and I love who you are all the time." We sat in comfortable silence as the evening settled around us. Two people who'd found each other across the arbitrary boundaries of age and experience and circumstance. The neighborhood around us continued its quiet rhythms. Frank and Rose taking their evening walk, the Thompsons calling their twins in for dinner, Patricia checking her mailbox with her usual surveillance attention. 6 months later, when Monica's lease renewal came up, the question of my moving in with her arose naturally, practically, without drama or ultimatums. Chloe would be leaving for college in the fall. Monica's business was thriving, and our relationship had proven its stability through the various tests that family and community had presented. The morning I carried my last box of belongings across the space between our houses, Frank Kowalski appeared at the fence line with his characteristic gentle smile. "Good choice," he said, nodding toward Monica's house where she was directing. "The placement of my design equipment in what would become our shared office space." "You think so?" I asked. "Rose and I have been watching you two for months," Frank said. "The way you look at each other, the way you handle problems together, the way you've both grown since you found each other. That's not young love or old love. That's real love." His words stayed with me as I settled into my new life, as Monica and I learned to navigate shared space and combined routines, as Chloe prepared for college with the confidence of someone whose family foundation was solid despite its unconventional construction. Looking back now, a year later, I understand that Monica's question that first night wasn't really about experience in the way I'd initially interpreted it. She wasn't offering to teach me sexual techniques or sophisticated lifestyle choices. She was offering to teach me about courage, the courage to want something fully, to risk disappointment in pursuit of connection, to choose growth over safety. The neighborhood has fully accepted us now, treating our relationship as part of Millbrook Heights' evolving story rather than a temporary disruption. Emma visits regularly, treating Monica like the sister-in-law she never expected to gain. Even Marcus has found a way to coexist with our reality. recognizing that his daughter's happiness was enhanced rather than threatened by her mother's fulfilled relationship. Most importantly, Monica and I have learned that age gaps matter less than alignment, that experience is valuable only when it's paired with openness to new experiences, that the best relationships aren't about finding someone to complete you, but about finding someone who inspires you to complete yourself. The woman who once asked if I wanted to find out how much more experienced she was than my ex has indeed taught me things I never could have learned on my own. But the most important lesson wasn't about sophistication or confidence or any of the obvious advantages that come with maturity. The most important lesson was about the courage to believe that I deserved to be chosen, loved, and valued exactly as I was, while still being inspired to become more than I'd ever imagined possible. Sometimes, late at night when Monica is sleeping beside me in our shared bed, I think about the careful life I'd built after Ashley's departure, the comfortable boundaries I'd drawn around my modest ambitions and quiet routines. That life wasn't wrong, but it was incomplete, a rehearsal for the real performance rather than the actual show. Monica Sullivan, my 49-year-old neighbor with her dangerous questions and transformative confidence, didn't just offer me experience. She offered me permission to live fully, to risk greatly, to love without reservation. And in accepting her offer, I discovered that the most profound education isn't about learning new techniques or acquiring sophisticated tastes. The most profound education is learning to recognize your own worth and then having the courage to demand that the world see it too. The morning Chloe graduated from the University of Colorado with her degree in environmental engineering, Monica stood beside me in the campus auditorium wearing a navy dress that brought out her eyes and a smile that could have powered the entire ceremony. 2 years of living together had taught me to read her emotional states with startling accuracy, and today she was radiating the complex mixture of pride, nostalgia, and bittersweet satisfaction that came with watching your child cross definitively into adulthood. She did it, Monica whispered as Chloe's name was called, her voice thick with the kind of emotion that mothers reserve for milestone moments. 4 years of late-night study sessions, relationship drama, major changes, and financial stress, and she actually did it. Watching Chloe walk across that stage in her cap and gown, tall and confident like her mother, but carrying herself with the particular poise of someone who'd earned her achievements through genuine effort, I felt a surge of unexpected paternal pride. Not because I'd replaced Marcus in any traditional sense, but because I'd been present for the daily struggles and small victories that had led to this moment. I'd helped with statistics homework, listened to complaints about impossible professors, offered perspective during the inevitable quarter-life crisis phone calls that punctuated her sophomore year. Marcus was there too, of course, sitting 3 rows ahead with his new girlfriend, a woman named Catherine, who worked in his law firm and treated family events with the careful politeness of someone still learning the dynamics. The post-divorce family gatherings had evolved into something surprisingly functional over the past 2 years, helped largely by Chloe's maturity and her obvious happiness with the life her parents had built separately. After the ceremony, we gathered for the obligatory family photos, and I watched Marcus and Monica navigate their shared parenting moment with the practiced ease of people who'd learned to prioritize their daughter's joy over their own complicated history. Catherine stayed tactfully in the background, while I found myself naturally filling the role of Monica's partner, without any awkwardness about my place in the family constellation. "Jake," Chloe said during a brief break between photo sessions, pulling me aside with the serious expression she wore when she had something important to say. "I wanted to thank you for something." "What's that?" "For making my mom happy," she said simply. "I know it sounds weird coming from your girlfriend's daughter, but watching her these past 2 years, seeing how she lights up when she talks about you, how she laughs more, how she's built this life that's really hers, it's meant everything to me." The gratitude in her voice was genuine and mature, the perspective of someone who'd watched her mother struggle through divorce and emerge stronger on the other side. Chloe had grown from a cautiously accepting teenager into a young woman who understood that her parents' happiness as individuals contributed to their effectiveness as her support system. "She makes me happy too," I said. "Happier than I knew was possible." "Good," Chloe said with a grin that reminded me of Monica at her most mischievous. "Because if you ever hurt her, I know where you live, literally, right next door to where I grew up." The family lunch that followed was held at a restaurant Monica had chosen specifically because it had enough space to accommodate our extended group without anyone feeling crowded or obligated to maintain forced conversation. Marcus and Catherine sat at one end of the table discussing legal cases, while Monica and I anchored the other end with Chloe between us, the guest of honor holding court with stories from her final semester and plans for her new job with an environmental consulting firm in Denver. "So you'll be moving back to the city," Marcus said during dessert, his tone carefully neutral but his body language suggesting he was pleased by his daughter's decision to return to familiar territory. "For now," Chloe agreed. "The firm does a lot of work with renewable energy projects, which is exactly the experience I want to build. Plus, I'll be close enough to visit Millbrook Heights regularly without having to coordinate major travel plans." Her diplomatic phrasing acknowledged both parents' claims on her attention, while maintaining her own autonomy. And I marveled again at her emotional intelligence. At 22, Chloe had developed skills for managing family complexity that many adults never mastered. The drive back to Millbrook Heights gave Monica and me time to process the day's emotions in the privacy of her car. She was quiet for the first 20 minutes, staring out the passenger window at the Colorado landscape rolling past, and I could sense her working through the mixture of pride and loss that came with major parenting milestones. "Strange to think, she won't be coming home for summer break anymore," Monica said finally. "The house is going to feel different without the possibility of her random appearances." "Different how?" I asked. "More permanently ours," Monica said, and there was something significant in the way she emphasized the word ours. "For the past 2 years, we've been building this life together, but part of me has always been holding space for Chloe's needs, for the reality that she might not approve of changes or feel displaced by new routines. Now she's launched, successfully, and happily, and suddenly the future feels more open." The word hung between us loaded with possibility, and I understood that we were approaching one of those relationship moments that would define our trajectory forward. Not a crisis or conflict, but a natural evolution point where new decisions needed to be made about what came next. "What does open feel like to you?" I asked. Monica was quiet for several miles, and when she finally spoke, her voice carried the careful tone of someone who'd been thinking seriously about something for a long time. "It feels like maybe it's time to stop thinking of this as your life and my life that happen to overlap," she said. "Maybe it's time to start thinking of it as our life that we're building intentionally together." The distinction was subtle, but profound, the difference between cohabitation and genuine partnership, between convenience and commitment. We'd been living together for over a year, sharing space and routines and daily decisions, but always with the underlying awareness that we were still two separate people who'd chosen to be together rather than one unit making choices collectively. "What would that look like practically?" I asked. "Well," Monica said, her tone shifting to something more businesslike. "My lease renewal is coming up in 3 months. We could look for a place that's ours from the beginning rather than yours, or mine that the other person moved into. Somewhere we choose together, design together, build together." The idea sent a thrill of excitement and terror through me in equal measure. Moving in together had been a natural progression, a practical decision that made emotional sense. But choosing a home together, making a financial commitment that bound our futures in concrete ways, felt like stepping across a line I hadn't realized we'd been approaching. "And professionally," Monica continued, "I've been thinking about expanding the real estate practice, maybe bringing in a partner, maybe adding services like interior design consulting or home staging. It would mean taking on more risk, but also more potential reward." I could hear the excitement in her voice as she described her business plans, the confidence that had only grown stronger over our 2 years together. Monica had built her practice from nothing into something genuinely successful, earning respect in the local market through competence and integrity, rather than connections or aggressive tactics. "What kind of partner?" I asked. "Actually," Monica said, and I could hear the smile in her voice, "I was hoping you might be interested." The suggestion caught me completely off guard. My freelance design work had been growing steadily, thanks partly to referrals from Monica's real estate clients who needed branding or marketing materials. But I'd never considered formalizing that connection into an actual business partnership. "You want me to join your real estate practice?" "I want us to build something together," Monica corrected. "A full-service approach to helping people create homes they love. You handle the design and branding side. I handle the buying and selling side. And together we offer something more comprehensive than either of us could provide alone. The vision she was describing was ambitious and appealing. A way to combine our individual skills into something larger and more significant. But it also represented a level of professional and financial entanglement that would make us partners in every sense of the word. That's a big step, I said. It is, Monica agreed. But Jake, look what we've built together in just 2 years. Look how we've supported each other's growth, how we've navigated challenges, how we've created something that works for everyone involved, including Chloe and even Marcus. I think we're ready for bigger steps. Her confidence was infectious, and as I listened to her describe the possibilities, I felt the familiar stirring of excitement that came with Monica's ability to see potential where I saw only uncertainty. She'd taught me to think bigger about my own capabilities, to take risks that felt manageable because they were calculated rather than reckless. That evening, we sat on our back deck with wine and notepads, sketching out ideas for what a combined practice might look like. Monica's business acumen was formidable when focused, and watching her break down market opportunities and competitive advantages reminded me why her clients trusted her with their largest financial decisions. The local market is growing, she explained, showing me demographic data she'd compiled. Young families moving out from Denver for more space and better schools, retirees looking for mountain communities with good healthcare access, remote workers who can live anywhere they want. All of them need homes, but more than that, they need homes that reflect their lifestyles and values. And that's where the design component comes in, I said, beginning to see how our skills could complement each other. Exactly. Instead of buying a house and then trying to figure out how to make it work, clients could work with us from the beginning to find or create spaces that actually fit their lives. You'd help them visualize possibilities. I'd help them navigate the practical realities, and together we'd deliver something more comprehensive than anyone else in the market. The more we talked, the more excited I became about the possibilities. The work would be challenging and complex, requiring skills I'd have to develop and risks I'd have to take. But it also represented the kind of meaningful career I'd always imagined but never quite believed was achievable. What about the financial side? I asked, because Monica's practical nature had taught me to consider the concrete implications of ambitious plans. I've been saving for expansion, Monica said. The practice is profitable enough to support hiring help and investing in better office space. If you're willing to contribute your client base and take on the design operations, we could structure it as a genuine partnership with shared ownership and shared risk. The offer was generous and fair, reflecting Monica's characteristic approach to relationships as collaborative rather than competitive. She wasn't asking me to work for her or contribute to her vision. She was inviting me to build something new, together, something that belonged to both of us equally. Over the following weeks, we developed our business plan with the same careful attention we'd brought to our personal relationship. Monica handled the market research and financial projections, while I worked on branding concepts and service offerings. We consulted with lawyers and accountants, researched competitors, and interviewed potential clients to test our assumptions about market demand. The process revealed new dimensions of our compatibility that surprised us both. Monica's strategic thinking balanced my creative instincts, while my attention to detail complemented her big-picture vision. We disagreed occasionally about priorities and approaches, but we'd learned to navigate conflict constructively, treating disagreements as opportunities to refine our ideas rather than threats to our partnership. Danny, predictably, had opinions about mixing business with personal relationships. "It's either going to be the best decision you ever made or the thing that ruins everything," he said during one of our workout sessions at his gym. "There's not much middle ground when you're talking about that level of integration." "What would you do?" I asked. "Honestly, I'd probably be too scared to try it," Danny admitted. "But you're not me, and Monica's not any random girlfriend. You two have something real, something that's already survived more tests than most relationships. Face, if anyone can make it work, it's probably you." Emma's response was characteristically more direct and supportive. "About time," she said when I called to tell her about our plans. "You've been playing it safe your whole life, Jake. Monica's taught you to think bigger, and now you get to prove you learned the lesson." You think it's a good idea? I think it's the right idea for you, Emma said. Maybe not for everyone, but definitely for you. You're happiest when you're building something meaningful with people you love, and this gives you a chance to do exactly that. Her confidence in my judgment was gratifying, but more importantly, it helped me recognize that the decision we were making reflected genuine growth rather than impulsive risk-taking. The Jake who'd met Monica 2 years ago would have been paralyzed by the magnitude of the commitment we were considering. But the man I'd become through our relationship was ready for the challenge, excited by the possibilities, confident in our ability to navigate whatever complications arose. The morning we signed the partnership papers, I stood in the empty office space we'd leased in downtown Millbrook Heights and tried to absorb the reality of what we'd just committed to. Miller Sullivan Design and Real Estate would officially open for business in 6 weeks after renovation and setup were complete. The name itself had been the subject of extensive negotiation, with Monica insisting that my name come first, despite her greater experience and established client base. "It's alphabetical," she'd said when I protested. "Plus, Miller Sullivan has a nice rhythm to it." But I knew the real reason was her determination to ensure that our partnership felt genuinely equal from the beginning, that neither of us entered the business feeling like a junior partner or auxiliary contributor. Monica's fairness in negotiations had been one of many reminders of why I'd fallen in love with her in the first place. The office space was larger than either of us had used before, with room for a reception area, 2 private offices, a conference room for client meetings, and a design studio where I could work on projects and meet with clients who wanted to see visual concepts. Monica had insisted on good lighting and quality furniture, understanding that the environment we created would communicate important messages about our professionalism and attention to detail. "Nervous?" Monica asked, finding me standing in the middle of the empty space with the signed lease in my hands. "Terrified," I admitted. "But the good kind of terrified." "The good kind?" "The kind that means you're doing something that matters enough to be worth the risk." Monica's smile in response was radiant, the expression of someone who'd found exactly the partner she'd been looking for in every sense of the word. She moved across the space to stand beside me, and together we looked out the windows at the street that would soon host our shared professional life. "You know what I realized?" Monica said. "What?" 2 years ago, when I asked you that question about experience, I thought I was offering to teach you things, but it turns out we've been teaching each other all along. Her insight was characteristically perceptive, and it made me think about everything we'd learned together. Not just about relationships and business, but about courage, growth, and the willingness to keep choosing each other despite uncertainty about the future. "What have I taught you?" I asked. "That authenticity is more attractive than sophistication," Monica said immediately. "That contentment isn't the same as settling. That love isn't about finding someone to complete you, but about finding someone who inspires you to complete yourself." "And what have you taught me?" Monica considered the question seriously, as she did most things. "That experience isn't about age, it's about willingness to keep learning. That confidence comes from making choices, rather than avoiding them. That the best relationships aren't about playing it safe, but about taking calculated risks together." Standing in our empty office, I understood that we'd reached the natural evolution of everything we'd been building since that first dinner, when Monica had looked me in the eye and asked if I wanted to find out how much more experienced she was than my ex. The question had seemed to be about physical intimacy, but the real answer had been about emotional maturity, professional partnership, and the courage to build a life together that was bigger than either of us could have created, alone. 6 months later, Miller Sullivan Design and Real Estate had exceeded our most optimistic projections for client acquisition and revenue. The comprehensive approach we offered had resonated with exactly the market Monica had identified, and our reputation for delivering results had spread through word of mouth faster than we'd anticipated. I was designing everything from complete home renovations to new construction layouts, while Monica was closing deals that allowed families to create homes that truly reflected their dreams. But the real success was personal. Working together had deepened our relationship in ways that surprised us both, revealing new dimensions of compatibility and mutual respect. We'd learned to separate business decisions from personal ones, to support each other's professional growth without losing our individual identities, to navigate the daily challenges of partnership with humor and grace. The evening of our 6-month Business anniversary. Monica and I sat on the deck of our new house, a craftsman-style home we'd purchased together in the hills overlooking Millbrook Heights, and reflected on everything we'd built together. Chloe had visited the weekend before, bringing her new boyfriend, and a confidence that suggested her post-graduation life was unfolding exactly as she'd hoped. Even Marcus had grudgingly admitted that our business partnership was surprisingly professional and apparently profitable. "Do you ever miss the simplicity?" Monica asked, refilling our wine glasses as the sun set over the mountains. "When the biggest decision we had to make was whose house to have dinner at." "Sometimes," I admitted, "but not enough to go back." "Me neither," Monica agreed. "Though I have to say, I never imagined that night when I asked you about experience that we'd end up here." "Where exactly is here?" I asked. Monica gestured toward the house behind us, the business we'd built, the life we'd created together through 2 years of daily choices and mutual support. "Here is home," she said simply. "Not just a place we live, but a life we've built intentionally together. A partnership that works in every sense of the word." Looking back now, I understand that Monica's original question about experience was really an invitation to discover what was possible when two people were willing to be completely honest about what they wanted and courageous enough to pursue it together. She'd offered to teach me about confidence, authenticity, and the willingness to take calculated risks. In return, I'd learned to see myself as someone worthy of love, partnership, and shared dreams. The sophisticated neighbor who'd once intimidated me with her poise and success had become my partner in every sense. The person I trusted with my vulnerabilities and ambitions equally. And the young man who'd been content with modest dreams had discovered that contentment and growth weren't mutually exclusive, that it was possible to be grateful for what you had while still reaching for what might be possible. 2 years after, Monica Sullivan asked me if I wanted to find out how much more experienced she was than my ex. I finally understood the real answer. It wasn't about sexual sophistication or worldly knowledge, though those had certainly been part of the education. The real experience she'd offered was the opportunity to discover what life could look like when lived with intention, courage, and the willingness to keep choosing love even when it required stepping outside the comfortable boundaries of safety and predictability. As we sat on our deck watching the stars emerge over our shared future, I realized that Monica's question had never really been about the past at all. It had been about the future, about possibilities, about the willingness to risk everything familiar for the chance to discover what might be extraordinary. And the answer, after 2 years of building a life together, was still the same as it had been that first night over tiramisu and candlelight. Yes. Always yes. I wanted to find out everything she had to teach me, and I wanted to keep learning, for the rest of our lives together. The morning of our 5th anniversary together, I woke to find Monica already gone from our bed, though the coffee scent drifting upstairs told me she hadn't gone far. 5 years of shared mornings had taught me her rhythms. She was an early riser who used the quiet hours before the world demanded her attention to plan, think, and occasionally surprise me with elaborate breakfast presentations that made our kitchen look like something from a cooking magazine. Downstairs, I found her standing at the kitchen island in her silk pajamas, surrounded by what appeared to be architectural drawings and property listings. The morning light streaming through our windows caught the auburn highlights in her hair, and at 54, Monica carried herself with the same confident grace that had first captured my attention, though now it was tempered with the settled contentment of someone who'd found exactly where she belonged. "Anniversary morning and you're already working?" I asked, wrapping my arms around her from behind and pressing a kiss to the side of her neck. "Not working," Monica corrected, leaning back against me. "Dreaming. There's a difference." She turned in my arms to face me, her green eyes bright with the particular excitement that meant she'd been developing an idea for hours and was ready to share it. Monica's ideas had a track record of transforming our lives in ways I'd learned to anticipate with equal parts excitement and trepidation. "What kind of dreaming?" I asked, though I was already scanning the papers spread across the counter, trying to piece together her latest vision. "The kind that involves expanding our business in a direction we've never considered," Monica said, her voice carrying the careful tone of someone who'd been rehearsing this conversation. "Jake, what if I told you I found the perfect property for our next venture?" The papers on the counter revealed themselves to be plans for a large Victorian house on the outskirts of Millbrook Heights, the kind of property that had been abandoned for years and would require extensive renovation to become functional again. But Monica's eye for potential had never steered us wrong, and I found myself studying the layout with growing curiosity about what she was envisioning. "It's the old Hartwell mansion," Monica continued, pointing to photographs that showed a stately but neglected building surrounded by overgrown gardens. "The family finally decided to sell after letting it sit empty for 8 years. The bones are solid, the location is perfect, and the price reflects the amount of work it needs, rather than its potential value." "And we would do what with it?" "Exactly?" I asked, though I was beginning to suspect where this was heading. Monica's smile was the one she reserved for moments when she was particularly proud of her strategic thinking. "We would turn it into the first full-service design retreat center in Colorado, a place where people could come not just to buy and decorate houses, but to completely reimagine how they want to live." The concept was ambitious and unlike anything we'd attempted before, but as Monica began explaining her vision, I could see how it built naturally on everything we'd learned about helping clients create homes that reflected their authentic selves rather than magazine ideals. "Think about it," she said, warming to her theme. "People spend months or years trying to figure out their design preferences by looking at pictures online or visiting showrooms that don't reflect real living spaces. What if instead they could spend a long weekend in an environment where they could actually experience different design approaches, test out color palettes and furniture arrangements, work with professionals to identify what truly speaks to them?" The idea was innovative and potentially profitable, but it also represented a massive expansion of our current business model. Instead of working with individual clients on specific projects, we'd be creating a destination that could serve dozens of people simultaneously while requiring significant upfront investment in property, renovation, and staffing. "How would it work practically?" I asked, my designer's mind already spinning through the logistics of creating multiple room environments that could be modified and updated regularly. "The mansion has 12 rooms on the main floors," Monica explained, pulling out detailed floor plans. "We could transform each into a different design aesthetic: modern minimalist, rustic farmhouse, urban industrial, classic traditional, with furniture and fixtures that clients could actually live with for a few days. They'd eat meals in different dining rooms, sleep in different bedrooms, work in different office spaces, until they discovered what felt most natural to them. And then we'd help them recreate those feelings in their own homes," I said, beginning to see the full scope of what she was proposing. "Exactly. We'd combine the retreat experience with our existing real estate and design services, creating a complete pipeline from inspiration to implementation. People would leave not just knowing what they wanted, but with a concrete plan for achieving it, and professionals they trusted to help them get there." The business model was elegant and comprehensive, addressing the biggest challenge we'd observed in our 5 years of practice: the gap between what people thought they wanted and what actually made them feel comfortable and happy in their living spaces. Too many clients had spent fortunes creating magazine-perfect rooms that felt cold and unwelcoming, or had paralyzed themselves with indecision because they couldn't visualize how design choices would feel in practice. "What's the timeline?" I asked, recognizing that Monica had clearly been thinking about this for longer than just this morning. "The property goes to auction in 6 weeks, Monica said. "I've already had our contractor walk through with me, and he thinks we could have the basic renovation complete in 4 months if we started immediately. The design installations would take another 2 months, which means we could potentially open next spring if everything goes according to plan." The speed of the proposed timeline was breathtaking, but Monica had developed an impressive track record for managing complex projects efficiently. Our current business had grown from startup to established practice in less than 3 years, exceeding every projection we'd made during our initial planning phase. "What about financing?" I asked, because 5 years of partnership had taught me to consider the practical implications of Monica's visionary thinking. "I've been putting together an investment proposal," Monica said, producing another folder thick with financial projections and market analysis. "We have enough saved for the down payment and initial renovation costs, but we'd need investors for the full build-out and operating capital. I think we could structure it as a partnership with local business leaders who want to be involved in developing Millbrook Heights as a destination, rather than just a bedroom community." Her research was thorough and persuasive, projecting revenue streams from retreat bookings, design consultations, product sales, and referral fees that could make the venture profitable within 18 months. But more than the financial opportunity, I could see that Monica was excited by the creative challenge, the chance to build something entirely new rather than simply expanding our existing services. "Have you talked to anyone else about this?" I asked. "I wanted to discuss it with you first," Monica said. "This would be our biggest risk yet, and it would change everything about how we work and where we focus our energy. I needed to know if you were interested before I started involving other people in the conversation." The consideration she was showing for my input and comfort level was characteristic of how our partnership had evolved over 5 years. Monica's natural inclination toward bold action had been tempered by experience working with someone whose approach to risk was more cautious, while my tendency toward careful analysis had been accelerated by exposure to her confidence in seizing opportunities. "I'm interested," I said, realizing as I spoke that it was completely true. Scared, but interested. "Good scared or bad scared?" Monica asked, echoing a conversation we'd had years earlier about the difference between fear that warned you away from disaster and fear that signaled you were approaching something worth pursuing. "Good scared," I said. "The kind that means we're thinking big enough to matter." Monica's response was to kiss me thoroughly, the kind of kiss that reminded me why I'd fallen in love with her ambition as much as her beauty, her willingness to dream large as much as her ability to make those dreams reality. That afternoon, we drove out to see the Hartwell mansion in person, and walking through the empty rooms, I began to understand Monica's vision in 3 dimensions. The house had the kind of architectural character that modern construction rarely achieved, with high ceilings, elaborate moldings, and oversized windows that would provide natural light for showcasing design work. The layout was formal but flexible, with rooms that could be adapted for different purposes, without losing their essential character. "Picture this main parlor as a showcase for maximalist design," Monica said, standing in what had once been the family's primary entertainment space. Rich colors, layered textures, bold patterns. The kind of room that feels intimidating in pictures, but actually creates a sense of warmth and intimacy when you're sitting in it. I could see it immediately, and found myself mentally arranging furniture and planning lighting that would make the space feel inviting, rather than overwhelming. The creative possibilities were endless, limited only by our imagination and budget, rather than by client preferences or practical constraints. "And this could be our minimalist space," I said, walking into the adjacent room that had better natural light and cleaner lines. White walls, natural materials, carefully chosen pieces that demonstrate how less can actually feel like more when done thoughtfully. We spent 2 hours walking through the house, room by room, developing ideas for how each space could be transformed to represent different approaches to creating comfortable, beautiful homes. Monica took notes while I sketched rough layouts, and by the time we returned to our car, we'd outlined a comprehensive plan for turning the mansion into something unprecedented in our market. "The gardens could be part of the experience too," Monica said as we drove home. "Different outdoor living spaces that show how landscape design integrates with interior choices. Maybe even a small greenhouse where people could learn about incorporating plants into their homes." Her enthusiasm was infectious, and I found myself adding details to the vision, imagining workshops and consultations and events that could make the retreat center a hub for anyone interested in creating homes that reflected their authentic selves rather than design trends or social expectations. That evening, we made dinner together in our own kitchen while continuing to refine the concept, and I marveled at how our partnership had evolved to the point where we could take on projects of this magnitude without questioning our ability to handle the complexity. 5 years earlier, the idea of renovating a mansion and creating an entirely new business model would have seemed impossibly ambitious. Now it felt like the natural next step in our professional evolution. "Chloe called while you were in the shower," Monica said, plating the salmon we'd grilled on our back deck. "She wants to drive up this weekend to celebrate our anniversary with us." At 27, Chloe had established herself as a successful environmental consultant and was engaged to a software developer named Michael who treated her with a combination of devotion and respect that made Monica and me feel confident about her choice in partners. Her relationship with our partnership had evolved from cautious acceptance to genuine enthusiasm, and she often brought friends to see our work when they were considering home purchases or renovations. "Did you tell her about the mansion idea?" I asked. I mentioned we were looking at a new opportunity, Monica said. But I wanted to wait until we decided whether to pursue it seriously before getting everyone excited about possibilities that might not materialize. Her caution was wise, learned from years of managing projects where early enthusiasm could create pressure to move forward with ideas that hadn't been fully developed. But I could hear in her voice that she was already committed to the mansion project in her heart, even if her business sense required more analysis before making it official. Over dinner, we talked through the practical challenges of expanding our business to include a retreat center, from staffing requirements to marketing strategies to regulatory considerations for operating what was essentially a hospitality business alongside our existing real estate and design practice. Each challenge we identified had potential solutions, but they would require careful planning and execution to avoid overextending ourselves during the transition period. What does success look like? I asked, using a framework Monica had taught me for evaluating major decisions. If everything goes perfectly, what will we have achieved in 5 years? Monica considered the question seriously, as she did most things. We'll have created something that didn't exist before, she said finally. A way for people to discover what home really means to them, not just what they think it should mean. We'll have built a business that's profitable and sustainable while also being genuinely helpful to people navigating one of the biggest decisions they'll ever make. And personally, I pressed. Personally, we'll have proven that we can take on any challenge together, Monica said. That our partnership is strong enough to handle growth, risk, and success without losing what makes it work in the first place. The confidence in her voice was well earned, based on 5 years of evidence that we could navigate professional and personal challenges while maintaining the mutual respect and genuine affection that had brought us together. Our relationship had survived the stress of starting a business, the complexity of blending families, the pressures of financial risk, and the daily negotiation required to balance individual needs with collective goals. The following week, Monica arranged for our contractor to provide detailed renovation estimates, while I worked on conceptual designs for each room environment. The numbers were substantial, but manageable, especially if we approached the project in phases rather than attempting to complete everything simultaneously. More importantly, the creative possibilities kept expanding as we developed specific ideas for how each space could serve our educational and inspirational goals. Danny's reaction to our mansion plans was characteristically direct. "You two are either brilliant or completely insane," he said when we met for our weekly workout session. "Probably both, which seems to be your brand at this point." "What's that supposed to mean?" I asked. "It means you keep making decisions that seem impossible until you actually pull them off," Danny said. "Moving in together, starting a business, buying a house, and now renovating a mansion to create some kind of design theme park. Normal people don't do things like this." "Maybe normal is overrated," I said, echoing something Monica had told me years earlier when I was still worried about other people's opinions of our relationship. "For you, yeah," Danny agreed. "Normal never fit you very well anyway, but just remember that success can be as challenging as failure in its own way. Don't let the winning streak make you forget to pay attention to what really matters." His warning was gentle but pointed, and it made me think about how dramatically our lives had changed since Monica first asked her provocative question about experience. Financial success and professional recognition were gratifying, but they weren't the core of what had made our relationship work. The core was simpler and more fundamental: mutual respect, shared values, and the willingness to keep choosing each other even when circumstances made that choice more complicated. Emma's response was more enthusiastic and immediate. "I want to be your first customer," she announced when Monica and I called to tell her about the mansion project. "Michael and I have been talking about buying our first house together, but we have completely different ideas about what we want. A weekend, figuring out our actual preferences before we start looking, sounds like relationship therapy disguised as interior design." Her endorsement was valuable not just because she was family, but because she represented exactly the demographic we hoped to serve: educated professionals who understood the value of thoughtful decision-making, but lacked the experience to navigate complex design choices confidently. "What about the financing?" Emma asked, because her psychology background had taught her to consider the emotional implications of major business decisions. "Are you comfortable with the debt load this will require?" "Nervous but confident," Monica said. "We've built enough of a track record to attract investors who believe in our ability to execute complex projects. and the potential returns justify the risk if we're right about the market demand. And if you're wrong? Monica and I exchanged glances, acknowledging the possibility we'd discussed privately, but hadn't articulated to anyone else. If we're wrong, we'll still own a renovated mansion in a desirable location, I said. Worst case scenario, we could convert it back to a residence and sell it for more than our total investment. So you're covered on the downside, Emma said, with approval. That sounds like the kind of calculated risk that actually makes sense for people with your track record. Her confidence in our judgment was gratifying, but more importantly, it helped me recognize that our approach to this opportunity reflected genuine growth in our ability to evaluate and manage risk, rather than simply succumbing to Monica's natural optimism or my traditional caution. The evening we submitted our offer on the Hartwell mansion, Monica and I sat on our deck with champagne, watching the sunset over the mountains and talking about everything that had led us to this moment. 5 years of building a relationship, 3 years of building a business, countless decisions both large and small that had shaped us into people capable of taking on projects that would have seemed impossible when we first met. Do you ever wonder what would have happened if I hadn't asked you that question? Monica said, referring to the dinner conversation that had started everything between us. Sometimes, I admitted. But I think we would have found each other, eventually. Maybe not that night, maybe not in that way, but eventually. What makes you so sure? Because we both wanted the same things without knowing how to ask for them, I said. You wanted someone who would see you as a complete person, rather than just a role you played. I wanted someone who would challenge me to grow without making me feel inadequate for where I was starting from. Those needs don't just disappear if you don't address them. Monica smiled, the soft expression she wore when I managed to articulate something she'd been feeling but hadn't put into words. I used to think experience was about accumulating knowledge, she said. But I've learned that real experience is about accumulating wisdom, the ability to recognize what matters and act on it even when it's complicated or uncertain. And what have you learned matters most? I asked. Connection, Monica said immediately. Not just romantic connection, though, that's certainly part of it, but genuine connection with work that serves people, with community that supports growth, with partners who choose each other consciously, rather than just falling into comfortable patterns. Her insight resonated deeply, capturing something essential about why our relationship had thrived while others struggled, why our business had succeeded while others failed, why we kept choosing growth over comfort, even when growth required more effort and risk. 3 weeks later, our offer on the mansion was accepted, and we found ourselves owners of a property that represented the biggest professional and financial commitment either of us had ever made. Standing in the empty foyer on the day we received the keys, surrounded by dust and possibilities, I felt the familiar mixture of excitement and terror that had accompanied every major decision Monica and I had made together. Ready? Monica asked, though she was clearly asking about more than just our readiness to begin renovation work. Ready, I said, understanding that we were about to embark on the most ambitious project of our partnership, one that would test everything we'd learned about working together while requiring us to develop entirely new skills and capabilities. As we walked through our mansion for the first time as owners, planning and dreaming and building on each other's ideas, I realized that Monica's original question about experience had never really been answered. We'd spent 5 years discovering what she had to teach me and what I had to offer in return, but the education was ongoing, evolving with each new challenge and opportunity we chose to pursue together. The woman who'd once asked if I wanted to find out how much more experienced she was than my ex had indeed taught me things I never could have learned on my own. But the most important lesson wasn't about sophistication or confidence or any of the obvious advantages that come with maturity. The most important lesson was about the courage to keep learning, to keep growing, to keep choosing each other and the life we were building together, even when that choice required stepping into unknown territory. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out.